Hello, everybody. Welcome to Becoming a Pharmacy Badass podcast. I am your host today, Heather Haro. I am here with one of the kindest people on the face of this earth, Sean Durham from Infinipharm. He comes to all of our shows, and I look forward to chatting with Sean at our shows because he's not only is he uber smart and so quick-witted and just knows so much about pharmacy, he's also just one of those people that his just everything about him screams kindness. So welcome. Thank you so much for being here, Sean.
Thank you, Heather, Harold. I appreciate you having me on here. I apologize for that.
No, that's okay. Look, in full transparency, we had to do a couple of takes because I couldn't remember what our podcast name was. So it's okay. We always say when we're encouraging pharmacists to make, podcast videos, and just people love the blunders. So we'll let the blunders go right past us.
Sounds good. Well, I appreciate you having me on here, Heather, and it's appreciate the praise. I don't I think that it's always a good thing to be able to try to be a good human being. So
Well, you
best thing to
definitely.
try for.
Yep, you definitely walk the walk. I enjoy our time spent at the summits. Okay, so Infinipharm is just a fantastic company, and I talk very very highly of all of our exhibitors because our exhibitors really do have a place in some pharmacies. Now, not all exhibitors are well suited for every pharmacy. Like we totally talk about that, but your solution is so fantastic, and I think a lot of folks aren't really tapping into the fantasticness of Infinipharm. So why don't you tell us a little bit about Infinipharm?
Okay. So first of all, it's a telepharmacy software website, so it's all web-based. And what that means is it enables pharmacies to perform functions of a telepharmacy, including remote checking of prescriptions, remote counseling, as well as doing workload balancing between different locations, especially if you have some locations that are a little busier than others. You can help to balance that workload between your pharmacists. And so that's where Infinipharm becomes useful. So for a lot of applications, it's actually very useful for pharmacies. There are some situations, like you said, where it's not. You have some pharmacy situations, like for example, if it's a single pharmacy that doesn't have a lot of volume, then it may not be useful. In fact, I can say it wouldn't be useful if it has low volume and it's a single location. Assuming again they don't have multiple locations or a remote pharmacy, right? That would be obviously an ideal situation. But yeah, that kind of a situation, it wouldn't be applicable. But others where there's either multiple pharmacies or where there is a telepharmacy or multiple telepharmacies, obviously that would be absolutely ideal for Infinipharm.
Tell me, tell me who your ideal, just the rock star pharmacies,
Yeah.
your ideal client.
Yeah, that would be independent retail pharmacies. So we do have some that do like bubble packing. So actually, we do have that happens. It's not specifically designed for bubble pack checking, and we actually do have plans of changing some of the way that the images are taken so that it will be more inclusive of bubble pack type of situations. But yeah, by and large, independent retail pharmacies are our biggest customers.
Who have great volume, and by not a lot of volume, what should the volume threshold kind of be there?
Yeah, great question. So typically you'll want a minimum of 35 scripts per day that are run, or at least for a remote location is what I should say. So specifically referring to a telepharmacy, a remote location, you would want a minimum of 35 scripts per day or 175 per week for it to be financially viable.
Okay.
Because otherwise it's just gonna not be enough to be able to really, um, cover your costs and make a little bit of a profit. Beyond that, if we're talking remote pharmacy, if we're focusing in on that, when it gets above 150 scripts per week, I'm sorry, per day, that's where you can at that point start considering employing a pharmacist for that location. Now, we definitely do have situations, going back to the workload balancing part of it,
Yeah.
that process more than that. In fact, we've had up to 300 scripts per day in a pharmacy that uses Infinipharm. And so but that's where it comes in, where that's where the workload balancing comes in, and that's where remote pharmacy work is not really part of it, because obviously you're not going to be doing 300 scripts per day at a remote location. That'd be just be insane. Um,
Right.
I mean, maybe it'd be possible you just have an amazing team of techs that are there that are just doing tons of work, and it's possible, but just I've never seen it. And so that would be, the 35 per week is where you want for a remote location. As far as workload balancing, um, probably at least over 100 scripts per day to be able to start considering that for, a location that's going to get a little busier.
Tell me what you mean by workload balance. Is that if I have two pharmacies and say pharmacy A does 2 scripts a day and pharmacy B does 1,500 a day, you can balance out that workload between the two?
Right. So I'm balancing workload for pharmacists. So this is where the busier pharmacy, you put all the prescriptions from both pharmacies into, they're being fed into Infinipharm as the
Okay.
check station, basically. So that's where Infinipharm essentially becomes part of the fill station, as well as becomes the check station for the pharmacists. And so when all those scripts are running into Infinipharm, you have these 2 or 3 or many locations that are being fed into Infinipharm, and then pharmacists are both logged into there. And then you have a pharmacist at a slower location that's able to get in and start checking the prescriptions that have been submitted for review. When they've got time, they can do that and help out with the pharmacist or pharmacists at the other locations,
Yeah.
by doing that. And that's where that balancing comes into effect. And the slower pharmacies have pharmacists that can help with more prescriptions, and those busier pharmacies can kind of hand off some of those prescriptions to be checked, as well as consultations could be performed remotely as well. So if it
Yeah.
gets busy enough that pharmacists at a physical site are getting really busy, they can't help all of the customers at the same time, the tech could take an iPad or some other device to the patient to the device, and then begin a consultation with a pharmacist that's not at that location.
That's incredible. That first thing on my head, it makes independent pharmacy even more competitive than the big chains, because the big chains don't do that cred. Like they just let this individual stores drown. We kind of see it all over social media, or I do anyways. I'm in all of those groups, but they kind of just let those locations drown. This way, you can have your whole business, which could be 2 or 3 pharmacies, really just working together in such a fashion that it's like a workflow angel, quite honestly.
Yeah.
And how competitive, we often don't think of I think this is a sexy product because I'm dealing with pharmacy all the time, but this isn't really something that we can advertise to patients that how fantastic this is going to be for you. However, it will show up in how fantastic you'll get testimonials of how great the service was, how fast the prescription was. People like to see the ability to ebb and flow, the ability to pivot. If it's too busy, oh, here's an iPad, Miss June. Our pharmacist at the Heather Harrow location can help you while this pharmacist is busy. People really appreciate that kind of thing. And although you can't really this isn't a super sexy thing you can market, it'll definitely come back to you in testimonials, in referrals, and in just having an awesome workflow. I absolutely love this. Um, so so I wanted to ask you what the biggest myth, or what is stopping people from adding a service like this to their pharmacies?
So I feel like it's multifaceted. One is, when it comes to like telepharmacies, I think that sometimes pharmacists are intimidated by having to start up a remote pharmacy, especially if they've never done it before. And so they're like, I'm not sure what I need to do to get that started. I don't know. And obviously, there are some states that don't allow telepharmacies yet. Along the eastern seaboard, there's very limited, almost no telepharmacies going on. There's actually been an exception in North Carolina, um, but most states, if we're talking about the majority of states, do allow to some degree or another remote locations. Now, as far as the workload balancing part of it goes, that's obviously could be done in any state that allows, as long as there's a supervising pharmacist on site, they can still have prescriptions checked by another pharmacist. I don't know of any states that prohibit that. It is possible there are, but I just am not aware of any. And so the myths that I think that are out there are regarding starting up a new telepharmacy when you haven't done one yet. I don't know if that's a myth, but the difficulty or strain point for getting it started up. The other one is that, well, telepharmacy software. This is where the myth is that telepharmacy software is not for me because I don't have any need for any remote sites, and that's where, it's more applicable. And I feel like telepharmacy for Infinipharm is somewhat of a misnomer because it definitely serves especially telepharmacies, but there is more to it than that, in that, providing that workload balancing. In addition to that, you also have diversion control. In a physical pharmacy, even though you have a pharmacist on site, a pharmacy may or may not have video recording of what's going on all the time, right? And if they have a pharmacist on site, because they're assuming, well, there's a pharmacist there, but they're not always present looking at what the technician's doing. Whereas
Right.
when you have a remote pharmacy, or you're utilizing this video recording, you have video evidence of anything that happens. So if anything goes wrong, you can go back and look at the video. The other thing is that you have audit logs within Infinipharm of who did what on what prescription. You have images that are being taken of the fill process. And so even if in a case where a customer or a patient comes back and they say, you didn't give me enough of my hydrocodone, they look back at that prescription, they see the image taken of those pills, and they say, actually, we did. We have the image to prove that we put this many into the bottle. And so whenever there's a dispute like that, then you can easily resolve it. So if there was a mistake, then you can find it and you say, oh, yes, we didn't give you enough. And, they give it to them.
Well,
Otherwise, you say, no, we gave you enough. Whatever reason you may have dropped them or who knows what, but we have the proof and evidence that we did give you what we were supposed to. And so
right.
there are those aspects of it that help with those different items of pharmacies or aspects of pharmacies that are not the typical remote or telepharmacy type of work.
Right. That's amazing. I'm sure that takes a little bit of stress off of pharmacists too. It's not based on memory, or just like you said, the pharmacist can't be watching every single thing that goes on. So I absolutely love that. If somebody wanted to start telepharmacy, they hear you talking, or hopefully chat with you at the summit, wherever they get in front of Sean. What do we do next? So I sign on the dotted line. Yes, please. I would like to be an Infinipharm pharmacy. What happens then?
So this is assuming all the other things happen before that, right? So
Yes,
they're getting the license from their board and they're doing
yes,
insurance and all that other
yes, yes,
stuff.
yes. We're
Yeah.
assuming that they are already a pharmacy, but have found you and want to add your product to their pharmacy.
Yeah. So at that, yeah, we just do an assessment to see what their network is like. So if they have, depending on the pharmacy management software, we sometimes need to have access to like firewall and ports and things on their network. Um,
Okay.
and then beyond that, we just need to make sure that we have depending on the pharmacy management software, some of them require an agreement to be signed so that they're releasing data to us. Um,
Okay.
so it depends on the pharmacy management software and their network. That's really the simple and easy question, but it really isn't too complicated. I mean, all we have to do is have access to their network. We look and see if it has what we need. If it doesn't, we tell them and recommend what they do need. If it is, we're good. We just get agreements in place, and like you said, they sign on the dotted line. We schedule a date for them to go live and for us to be there in person to do a training.
Okay.
Um, and then they get going. We train them on that first day and give them some training right beforehand, and then they can get going and get used to it. And it actually is a pretty easy product to get used to. It's more the workflow and the pharmacy management software that for some pharmacies it takes a little bit of a change of mindset, because as they're processing those prescriptions, they're going into a system that now they don't have to have baskets piled up waiting for a pharmacist to check. So they're just having to change their mindset of, okay, I don't have to have this physically here. We just have to make sure that they're just not being sold to the customer until it's been checked within Infinipharm. So there's a little bit of that mindset change that needs to happen for a pharmacy that's never done a telepharmacy before, or that's never used the workload balancing part of it, that would digitize all the records that you don't, and all the fill process, so that they don't have physical product on their counter anymore that's waiting to be checked. So
Right.
those are the kinds of things that kind of require a change of mindset and workflow process.
Wow. In person, you guys go personally to every single pharmacy and help them on that first day?
Yeah, we do. There's only one exception. If they've already been using another telepharmacy system and they're already familiar with the process, we don't have to do an on-site training. We do a remote training at that point, and we just make sure that they're good with things, and we're still available to them, at any time to answer any questions. But if they're new to telepharmacy, or if they haven't done it for a long time, then yes, we go in person.
That's incredible. Is there any of the PMSs that you can't work with?
There are. So the list that's smaller is actually probably the amount that we do
Okay.
work with. So we work with any what was prior TDS. It's now I'm blanking the name right now. Um, Anybody would know it. So anybody was prior to utilizing something that was used to be known as TDS, or like
Oh, yep.
RX30,
Yep.
Computer RX, those kinds of solutions. I think it's called Outcomes now.
Yep.
Um, anyway, those ones we integrate with, and
Okay.
Pioneer RX, and potentially any red sale technology company, so QS1, Pioneer RX, as well as Liberty Software.
Very good. Very good. Okay. So that's a broad section
Yeah,
of pharmacists that use those one of those three major PMS systems.
yeah, and we've had talks with a few others. One over in New York, uh, what is their name? Something RX, can't remember.
Best
Prime RX.
Prime RX.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Prime RX. So we've had talks with them. And we've also had talks with Epic.
Mhm.
So we've like Willow, Epic. So we do have connections with other pharmacy management softwares out there, but we just haven't had um, any anybody who wants to begin using Infinipharm to use it, because we don't develop those out until there's actual, demand for it. And so that we were not wasting our development time on developing something that may or may not be used.
I absolutely love that, and I totally understand that part of it. Um, well, that seems like if it's the mindset can often be hard, but sometimes it seems like it's relieving something. Like it doesn't seem like some products or services that you bring into a pharmacy, it's trading one headache for another. And I super feel like even when you're describing all the baskets being stacked up, that turns that headache into something useful, some way that you can process it and see it and prioritize it. And I love that. I love that. Even just the visual of that you're helping the workflow instead of just exchanging headache for headache, which is sometimes what some products do. I think you're a solution, not just a switch. And I absolutely love that. Now, when we first got on, I asked you if there was anything new and exciting, and you just wanted to really tell people that you're not just telepharmacy, but you're also the balance. Is there anything else? The consult, the balance, the verify. Was there any of those that we missed in our talk? Because I want to make sure that people really understand, how awesome you guys are.
Sure, I'll mention a few other things that are currently in development that we're excited about. And one is pill counting. So we're implementing pill counting into our workflow process, so that when they're taking those images, they're also getting a count of those pills, so that they're not having to use a separate machine to do that. It's not quite as robust as like an actual um, oh man, Icon or um, Kirby Lester. So
Sure.
there are certain features that they have that we won't be able to mimic, but by and large, for the majority of pharmacies, our pill counting would work just fine. And beyond that, we also have kind of a pre-processing pre-check that we're implementing where we're going to be automatically checking the data that's coming in, and then we're going to flag it for the technician for them to know if there's already a mismatch of data. So if there's like, here's the prescribed data and here's the fill data, or what you're going to be filling, and there's a mismatch, the technician will know about it right offhand without a pharmacist even looking at it, and they'll be able to fix anything that's obvious before it goes to the pharmacist. Now, obviously, you know, um, checking for drug background and interactions and other things like that, that will still be a pharmacist's job. But we're at least looking at the data, and we're doing kind of a pre-check on data, and just making sure, does everything match up? And if it doesn't, we're just flagging it for the technician to see. And if they need to fix something, they will. And if they don't, they can still move it on in the process. If for some reason, like we checked it and it was missing a comma or something like that. It's that's something simple that, and we may even be able to just not have to worry about that. But that's an exciting feature that's coming soon.
That's exciting.
Probably beginning of next year, we're going to have both of those up and running and part of the workflow.
Well, at the beginning of next year, we'll have to have you back on, and you can, tell us about the exciting new things and give us updates on those. Gosh, I'm so excited that you came on, and we were able to kind of talk through exactly what you guys do and how you help pharmacy. I totally agree with you. We send folks to you, but I often hear the same thing, that we're not ready for telepharmacy, or we don't need that, or they're for more advanced pharmacies. So I'm so pleased that you were able to get on there and kind of not squash that myth, but really, speak to exactly who you can help. And for the love of God, I love that you say, look, if you're a small pharmacy or do this or do that, that we can't help you. I love that you just tell it like it is. There's no guessing or wasting time on phone calls when you're not a perfect fit for them. So I love that for you. Thank you so much, Sean, for coming on. What's the best way that someone can get a hold of you?
So they can contact us via the site. We have a contact form. We have a demo request form. They can email me, sean.durham@infinipharm.com. So any one of those is a good contact method.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on, and I'll be sure to check back in with you in January.
And thank
Thank
you,
you,
Heather.
everybody. Thanks,
What's that?
everybody. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye.